All right, folks, it's Monday, and we normally would talk about the big hits that we've got, and we will. But the bigger thing is the Bears trading Justin Fields and Pete's reaction to that. Bang! Let's get started.
He's back, baby.
I'm back. I'm off the boat. Back in Puerto Rico.
I got to tell you, you not only travel more than any guy I know, but you also travel on so many different types of transportation.
Yeah. Could be a sailboat, could be a cruise ship, could be anything but a Boeing airline these days, Pete. Holy crap. They've had more problems with Boeing in the last week, Boeing planes. You notice, though, that I will give Boeing a little bit of a break here, Pete. Not about doors falling off and things like that of a brand new plane, because that's pretty much on Boeing. But how about the rest of these? A 777 or a Dreamliner or any of these that aren't exactly new, that's got to be on United and their, repair facility. Because I don't know what they're doing, but it's going to affect that stock, both Boeing and United, because it's not happening on Southwest. It's not happening on American, but on Boeing planes flown by United.
It is amazing. I'll tell you what, and it's scary, and it was interesting because I was flying yesterday, and as I was flying, the guy insured us. He got on there, and he goes, well, and by the way, you don't have to worry. This is not a Boeing plane. And I'm like, ooh, ouch. That was a shock.
Ouch. I tell you what, I was watching a special, Pete, by Jamie Oliver. I won't belay it much more than this, folks, but he was talking about when they rolled out the 787 Dreamliner, Pete, in 2007. It was plywood. It was not a real plane. They pushed it out, and even the employees are looking up at it going, God, that's beautiful. Who did this? And then they look up through the landing gear, and it's hollow. There's nothing in it. And it's like, what the? I always thought Boeing was the best. Turns out, maybe not.
Maybe not. In a duopoly, if you're not the best, you're the worst.
That's right. Well,
I feel like Talladega Nights.
If you're not first, you're last. All right. Welcome back to Rebel's Edge, folks. He is Pete Najarian. He and I are going to break down some news for you, tell you which side we're on, which we'd be bullish or bearish. Let's get started. We're going to try a new thing today, Pete. Monday recap. So I'm going to throw them out there, Pete, that the major indexes, we were lower last week for the first time in a long time because we had some hot inflation readings. And people are worried about Fed cuts. We'll get to that in a minute, whether or not that's going to happen before the second half. And airlines like what we were just talking about, Southwest was down 18%. Because they've had problems with their planes? No, because they can't get any more Boeing planes because everything's been stopped, basically. Yeah. And the Boeing safety problems are forcing them to cut back on routes and things like that. So there's a lot of bad stuff that was happening last week, Pete, for the airlines. Higher fuel costs don't help either, do they?
No, absolutely not. And I think that's what we talk about. We talk about sticky inflation. There's a lot more out there than meets the eye. And I think a lot of people are starting to see that when they get the CPI numbers, the PPI numbers. That's what we got last week. Now we got Powell coming up in front of us. So we've got all of that. Adobe was a little bit of a shocker. That was one of those names that everybody just assumed is just going to absolutely crush everything on their earnings. That did not happen. And also the movement that we had, just the sheer movement that we had out of Bitcoin this past week, John, that was incredible to get all the way up to 73,000, but then reverse back down to about 68,000. I mean, the moves that we are seeing there are like no moves that we've seen in a very long period of time. And that thing has been on an incredible trajectory to the upside, Bitcoin. So that's going to be affecting a lot of different folks as well. So there's a lot to what we've been seeing over the last week or so. And now we're going to have to look up to Wednesday is going to be a very big day.
Yep. Pete's diving into macro minute, folks. And that macro minute is indeed the Fed meeting. because the Fed meets tomorrow and again on Wednesday. They come up with their decision and their press conference on Wednesday. So that's why we're talking about this is going to be very critical after all this hot inflation information that we've got. Inflation information. I like that, Pete. I might have to coin that phrase. Anyway, I guess I just did. What do you think about the Fed on Wednesday? Are they going to say, we're going to hit the market with some sort of surprise, or are they going to push it out, Pete?
Not a chance in any chance that these guys do anything other than pause. Right now, the Fed tool is showing it 99+%. I'd say that's pretty much a slam dunk. I think the only thing that could happen, potentially different than what we expect, is if we can keep Powell just sort of reined back a little bit. Don't talk too much. Don't give too much detail. Do what you've got to do, but give people, the real numbers and then stop.
Sure.
And if he can do that, I think we're probably set to be able to hold on. Otherwise, things can get a little bit dicey. But for right now, there is no chance, virtually no chance, that we don't do anything other than just to sit, pause, and wait for the next one.
Yep, I agree. He is not going to say those cuts are coming sooner. Instead, he's going to say we are still data dependent, and the data's been hotter than we would like, so we can't say we're going to cut now. We're going to push it out a couple meetings probably. All right, what about fantastic futures, Pete?
Fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures, one of our favorites. Cocoa, which Pete's been talking about forever. The May futures contracts are up 111%, and we're not even closed out with the first quarter yet, Pete. We're getting close, but 111% in a quarter, and this is the worst chocolate crisis since Johnny Depp played Willy Wonka. That's what I'm going to say, Pete, because that movie sucked, by the way, and he was terrible in it. It was the worst, and I love Johnny Depp, almost everything. I loved The Tourist. I loved all of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, but this one was terrible, and it's no wonder that chocolate didn't do well after that, because people were seeing that going, doesn't make me want to have a bunch of chocolate and, hang around with really snotty kids.
Well, as you said, John, and it's been on this unbelievable trajectory. I'll just say real quick, as far as that goes, the demand is there. Weather is an issue, and that's where they sit. And the same thing can be said right now about copper to some degree. Not the same kind of moves, but definitely moving similarly like that. I'll just hit crude oil just real quick, John. We look like we've gotten not only over 80, but maybe it's going to be a little bit stickier above 80 this time. We didn't get that immediate drawback. Here we are now in the 81s. Should be pretty interesting. And oh, by the way, if you want to see another that could be added and replacement of the Fantastic Seven that these ridiculous lunatics have created, if you take away the three that I've already taken away, so you've only got four, you might want to add Valero to the list, John, because take a look at Valero at all-time highs, and you can say the same thing about a lot of those various names that are in the refining business right now because of what's going on with crude and gas prices and everything else. They are killing it. They are crushing the earnings, and that's something that everybody should keep an eye on.
That's a great insight, Pete, into those refiners, in particular VLO, Valero. Biggest refiner in the world, by the way. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Chinese EVs, Pete, because there's a lot of moves here. Elon Musk was probably the catalyst behind a lot of this, because last year he made multiple price cuts, and these guys were already bleeding cash. But the Chinese EVs, like XPEV, they're planning to launch a low-cost electric vehicle brand. That's ahead of what Warren Buffett had invested in years ago, Pete, BYD. And BYD had been doing price cuts. Now XPEV is doing price cuts. And many of you might say, well, how big are they? Well, so the average EV out of XPEV used to be 200,000 yuan. Now they're going to cut that to about 100 to 150,000. So it's somewhere between a 50% cut, 25 to 50% cut is what they're talking about, Pete. And yet the stock is zooming to the upside. it was gaining momentum while all of its competitors were moving down.
Yeah, I found that really interesting as well. It was up like 3-4%. It was moving to the upside. It hit the highest levels it has been at since January. So there a lot of positives being read into this. But my first thought looking at this, John, was, well, now what's your margin turning into now as you're as you're moving in this direction? So I don't know. I find the whole thing very interesting to just try to dissect and try to figure out how things are going to play out for XPeng. But I don't see this being as positive as they do. They talked about the idea that they would still have virtually everything that they've always been putting into the other vehicles. And it sounds to me like they're just essentially just saying, you know what, we're just going to cut it by give or take close to 50%. And we're putting it out there just so we can get the sales. So they're going to have to drive off of volume now. Now, I still think the margins are going to get absolutely crushed. So am I interested in this one? Absolutely not.
Well, and to give you guys, again, a yardstick or a measuring point for this, Chinese EVs from XPEV will be cut to between 14,000 US dollars and 21,000 US dollars. That's that 25% cut to 50% cut we're talking about. So they're much cheaper than anything you can buy in the United States. But that's for a host of reasons, not the least of which might be that they got to pass all our crash test standards and all the rest of that. But anyway, let's talk, Pete, about B. Riley. This is a big financial giant trading to the downside hard because this boutique investment bank failed to file their audited annual report. Oh my, that is something, folks, that can almost put you out of business. It can drive you to the pink sheets. That is not good. And by the way, we had unusual activity in here, Pete. They were buying puts in a big way. So when you look at that screen, take a look at the bearish sign there. The bearish sign on the far left side of that screen, that's from our intellectual property and artificial intelligence known as Rebel Research. It looked at it, that's prior to today, and it said bearish. And look at where the 50-day moving average is. That's 50 MA, moving average. 50-day moving average, 19. It's trading 1577, Pete. So that's resistance to the upside now. I think this thing, I mean, those of you who were smart enough and lucky enough to follow us into the puts on this one, you're a happy camper. You're making a lot of money. But the people at B. Riley are not happy about this because, like I say, you got to file that thing quick. You can't miss your annual financial filings, Pete.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. It's shocking that they did, John. And the other side of it is this, because you know where I'm going. You know what the short interest is on this stock? It's anywhere between 43% and extremely higher than that, 60 some odd percent. So the shorts are there. They are feasting today. I wonder if we'll see any kind of buying, John, or do they think this thing is literally just going to be flushed down the toilet and go even further to the downside? I don't know the answer to that, but it will be interesting to see if we see any kind of a stop and maybe even a little bit of a lift, because I think that might indicate that at least some of the shorts maybe are trying to cover at this point in time. This is something you cannot do as a company. The auditors, the extensions and everything else, obviously that is a lot of red flags that are going up. They deny everything, by the way. They deny any wrongdoing. And
yeah, but what's the delay then?
Right.
I mean, yeah, you're denying wrongdoing, but why the delay? I mean, You've got a whole cadre of people, Pete, at every multi-billion-dollar firm, and this is like it was a $6 billion company just days ago. What the heck? How do you not get that audited financial done? So their heads will roll, I guarantee you, Pete. And it could even be all the way up to the CEO, not just the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. All right, let's talk about Google. Google, or Alphabet, as they like to be called, I guess, shares were moving up because Apple is in talks to license Google's Gemini suite of generative AI tools now for their iPhones and so forth. Why is this a big deal? Because Apple is late to the party, folks. Apple spent way too much time trying to compete with Elon Musk, I guess, and create an EV. They finally bagged that, and they turned everybody's attention to artificial intelligence, but might have been a little late. over there, and they're trying to play catch up now, right, Pete?
Yeah, I just wonder, what is Cook up to? It just seems like he has really just sort of had a few missteps, John, over the last couple of years, specifically this one. I mean, when everybody's going to AI and for some reason Apple's not, and now they're starting to try to catch up. I mean, that's an issue. And we all knew, we'd all heard, and we all expected something from Apple and the EV world, right? We expected, would they build their own car? A lot of people said, no, they're probably not doing the car, but they just want to do all of the electronics, blah, blah, blah. All of that made a lot of sense, but then where is that? So we've gotten nothing from that from the EV side. And then you're not really big enough right now in the AI world. So you're having to do this deal with Google, which I'm sure Apple's not very happy about. They love to keep everything in-house, as you and I both know. But it's definitely putting them into a very interesting spot. And oh, by the way, when they do that whole worldwide developers conference, John, that should be pretty interesting in June, just to see what kind of announcements do they make, how deep, how committed is Apple, and they better be committed because as you and I both know, AI is here. It's probably here to stay. And everybody that's out there that's part of it right now, when you look at how much money is going into it from Meta, from NVIDIA, from all these various companies we talk about all the time that are associated with AI, we are talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent there. Oh, yeah. And Apple seems to be the last guy onto this whole run.
Yeah. And they're going to license this for a period of time, folks, this Gemini from Google. But you know that they have in their hearts, they know they have to get this on their own. Yeah. Just like they've bought chip companies and then made their own chips instead of buying them from others. They're going to have to do the same with AI. They can't stay on Google's platform for that, Pete. Right. All right. How about this? We have another one, folks. Another one, to quote DJ Khaled, and that is HCP, HashiCorp. This is cloud software. And we had unusual activity in this one as well, folks. So the unusual activity on this one was upside call buying. They were buying the April 30 calls with the stock at basically $27. Well, in the pre-market, the stock jumps 11%. And obviously, since you know Pete and I, we like to buy the at the monies, those things moved up fast. And even those out of the monies, the April 30s, that are, right at the money now, had to have a nice pop. So that's why we care so much about unusual activity, because sometimes somebody knows something. And in this case, they profited mightily. They bought a bunch of calls, and now we're riding that wave right along with them.
Yeah, it's been an incredible run, John. They're talking about a sale. They have all these different commentary that's out there. The stock's anywhere between $19 and $36 over the last 52 weeks. And here we are today trading closer to 29. So you're pushing up somewhere near those levels. I would think in most cases, a lot of the time, people just want to use that 52-week high as sort of like the area that they'd like to at least get to, especially a stock like this that was a little bit lower than that. You had the unusual option activity. It was up pretty decent on Friday, a big after hours mover. And here we are today. It's been an incredible run for these guys. There will be some competition. The cloud world always seems to have a lot of people kind of sniffing around. This should be pretty interesting. We'll see how it all closes out. But I would also remind everybody, when you're in something like this, you get a move like that, sometimes DDA comes into play, right, John? Discipline dictates action. When you have something that moves pretty substantially, you don't always want to just sit and wait because sometimes you might wait too long. So I would just say that if you were lucky enough to catch the ride, you might want to trim something at this point.
Yeah, especially, folks, time decay is so critical. It's where most people screw up with options. They're not ready for that clock to keep ticking. And for that option, with every tick, it's worth less and less because you've got fewer days to be right. If this was a May or a June option, a lot more time to be right. This one expires in just 4 weeks. So you don't have a lot of time for more news to come in that could boost it higher. You'd be foolish not to take at least 50% off the table. That would be what Pete and I would do. You have to decide what's appropriate for you. Mm-hmm. All right, Pete, I can't wait because my Bears made some big moves this weekend.
Yeah.
I can't wait for your take.
The AFC is in trouble. Justin Jefferson will be traded to the Cincinnati Bengals within the next couple
will
days.
he?
Cincinnati's going to give up 2 first-round picks. They're going to trade for Justin Jefferson.
I like
They're
if
going to
this
sign
actually
Justin
comes
Jefferson
true, John,
and Jamar
this
Chase
is very
to
good for the
3-year,
Vikings,
$100
in my
million
opinion.
deals.
I'm the one guy
That's
in
why he
Minnesota who
turned
said,
down the $30
get
million
picks.
per year
There's
deal
receivers
that the
everywhere
Vikings
right now.
offered him. They are about to move him, and the Cincinnati Bengals are about to make one of the biggest splash
It will be
moves
the
this
pro
offseason.
version of LSU, by
This
the way.
trio already has chemistry together.
Quarterback,
You remember
both
the national
receivers.
championship that they won together in
Chad.
LSU, right?
And
this right here is
Justin?
a boss move by Cincinnati because
Not
if
bad.
you're going to
They got 2
compete
receivers this year in the
with
draft
Kansas
that are
City,
almost as good
in
as
order
those
to get
guys.
to that AFC
So why don't the
championship game,
Vikings just get one of them? Huh?
yeah,
Well, it's interesting.
that
It's interesting,
of
John.
course is Ched
Oh, go ahead.
at the GOAT. Ched CHEDD at the GOAT. All right, sorry, Pete.
No, that's okay. That guy's fun. He's really smart. I think he could be onto something. Now, you never know. Things can fall apart very quickly when these guys are trying to deal players and all the rest of it. We all know that. But if this were to happen, John, as a Viking guy, I would say bring it on, because you got to have some guts sometimes. And as much as I love Justin Jefferson, think he's maybe the best receiver in football right now, maybe. But others could argue. A lot of different other guys, probably LSU receivers everywhere else in the NFL. But the reality is, I think if you could get some picks, right now you don't have a quarterback. Our best quarterback on the roster here in Minnesota, John, is Sam Darnold, who has almost as many interceptions in his career as he has touchdowns. So that isn't the right guy. So are you going to give a receiver like JJ $50 million? I don't think so. Maybe if the Vikings could have pulled their head out, they would have given a 6th-round draft pick to the Chicago Bears, kind of the way it all kind of unfolded with the Pittsburgh Steelers, John, which is the trade you and I were looking at. We're like, I think the whole world is looking at this going, now what is Chicago doing? Even if you get and want Caleb Williams, why would you not hold on to Justin Fields, and then figure out how you want to approach the rest of it? And it doesn't have to be on draft day, by the way. You could do it in a lot of different ways. Maybe you do it for other players. You could do a lot of different things. But I don't know, John, it's really interesting because just a week ago, I was out at a dinner with some friends in Florida, and lo and behold, one of the guys, I'm standing there, and I'll tell you who he is in 1 second, but I walked over to this gentleman and I go, hey, how's it going? And he goes, how you doing, Pete? Blah, blah, blah. I said, I just wanted to congratulate you on your Mac Jones trade, because let me tell you something. I said, you fleeced the New England Patriots with a 6th-round pick with this guy after he went as high as he did. He was the number 15 pick in the draft. You know where Justin Fields was? Number 11. They both got 6th-rounders. And I'm standing there, and I said to Shahid Khan, I said, hey, look, congratulations, because I think you're moving in the right direction with the Jacksonville Jaguars right now. And he goes, thank you very much. He goes, I agree. He goes, I basically gave him a bag of balls, which is exactly what they did when you give a 6th-round draft pick. So,
yeah. Oh, but Pete, it could be a 4th-rounder. It could be a 4th-rounder, depending how much Justin plays.
If he plays 51%, it turns into a 4th-rounder in 2025. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Here's the deal that I looked at, Pete. They're either one of the shrewdest moves made in pro football in the offseason, or one of the dumbest. And everybody thinks it's the dumbest, including me. I think it's very likely to be the dumbest move they could have made. Should have held on to him, drafted Caleb, and now when everybody else is looking around going, God, well, we didn't get the quarterback we wanted. We're going to have to, how much you guys want for Fields? Because obviously you're committed to Caleb at this point. And the Bears aren't committed to anybody. It's just like, Pete, when Manning, not Peyton, but his brother, came out and was drafted by the Chargers. And his dad said, you ain't going to the Chargers, man, because they ruin quarterbacks. And they made that they drafted him, but then they had to immediately trade him to the Giants. Now, the Bears could be shrewd like that. The Bears could make everybody think they want to draft Caleb. They could actually draft Caleb. And meanwhile, they're hearing all of what everybody else is saying, Pete, and then they trade him without ever signing him or anything else. Obviously, anybody can sign a quarterback because you're getting them for 4 years for nothing. But that's why you're idiots to give away Fields for a bag of balls, for a sixth-round pick. Makes no sense whatsoever. But, the Bears, that's the kind of moves they make, Pete.
And I liked what this guy was starting to build there, right? He's made some trades. I liked a lot of the trades that the more recent GM, he's done some good things. But this one's terrible. It just is, because unless Caleb actually is who everybody thinks he is right now, and I'm still 50-50, because there's a heck of a lot to be said, John, with are you a system quarterback or are you really a great quarterback? And that's where this whole debate comes in. Mac Jones, turns out he might be a system guy, right? Some of these guys are in the right system. If you're at USC, Alabama, it's tough to figure out, are you a system guy or are you a guy who actually is good? Name me a USC quarterback who's worth a damn. Now, everybody points to one guy, went to Cincinnati, had one Super Bowl run, and it had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with the very good team that they had, running back, everything else, great offensive line. So it's just one of those things where are you a system guy or are you not? And I think that's the big issue. And I'm wondering if Caleb Williams is a system guy. And, oh, by the way, for the people who say, well, you're nuts, Pete, I'd say, well, why did they lose the last 6 games of the year at USC? I mean, tell me, if this guy's the best quarterback in all of football, how did they not win some games towards the latter half of the year, right? And it's like,
here's what I do, Pete. This would make them geniuses if they did this. Now everybody's convinced that it's Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams, Caleb Williams. So now, between here and draft day, somebody that really is sold on Caleb Williams comes to them and says, okay, I'll give you 2 number ones for that spot. I'll give you this year's number 1, next year's number 1. The Bears did it last year when we made that trade with Tepper. Let's do it again. Do it again. And instead, get the trade down, get the guy you really wanted anyway, which is Jaden Daniels. He'll be a better pro quarterback. Mark my words, a better pro quarterback, Pete, because he reads defenses better. And Caleb, I love the passion, but I don't like to see him crying in his mom's arms when he can't beat Washington, when he can't beat Utah and things like that. That's not the guy that's going to lead the team if I was the GM.
Yeah, no, you're right. And as a matter of fact, I was with one of the LSU coaches just this past weekend, and we were talking about all the different players that they've got in the NFL, and they've got a ton, John. Linebackers, they got them. Wide receivers, they dominate the entire league. And he said Jaden Daniels, the best quarterback in this draft. It's not even a debate by far. 6'4", 210-pound kid. He can sling it. He's a stud, and he can make it happen, and he's ready for the NFL. And he's played in the Pac-12. Then he had to play in the SEC. He's done it all. The kid's a heck of a player and somebody that I think we all think is probably better than some of the other guys that are actually ranked above him. Drake May, I'm still kind of I'm not positive on him, John. And everybody else is. They're like, he's the guy. I'm like, well, I saw him against my Gophers, and I didn't think he was unbelievable, that's for sure. I didn't think he was the second pick in the draft kind of a thing. All right, let's jump to the more fun thing. Mike Tyson, Jake Paul. And you're into this stuff even a little bit more than I am, John. I watch some boxing. You watch some of these other things. You get into some of these crazy MMA things and all this other stuff. And it's great. But what is Jake Paul? So he's noted for being a YouTuber with 23 million subscribers and 6 billion views and everything else. And then suddenly he starts fighting guys, right? Mm-hmm. I think he's made a huge mistake here, John, because he thinks he's going in there with Mike Tyson to have a good time, show everybody a little something, show him he's kind of tough and everything else. And what he doesn't understand is there's a reason he was called the baddest man on the planet. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is, not only was he and is still, in my opinion, the baddest man on the planet, he looks great. He's 57 years old. He's training like a freak show. He is not taking this lightly at all. And if he bites off his ear, that might be worth a few more $1 million, John, because who knows? I mean, I love Mike. You and I both love Iron Mike. I mean, this guy, he would go into the ring and 20 seconds later he'd walk away. And everybody wondered, can this guy ever fight like into the second or third round? And finally he had a couple of those, but I'll tell you, I don't know, John. I look at this one and I think this really ends ugly for Jake Paul. No matter how he does it, I just don't see it. July 20th, AT&T, it's going to be packed.
Oh, yeah. I've got a bunch of friends that want to go, and I'm like, why would I want to go for a 30-second match? Because I've seen just what you've seen, Pete, and I've seen them in person just like you have. Unless Mike decides to carry him, Pete, in which case, again, I don't want to see it if Mike carries him. But I don't think when Mike Tyson was being asked long before this, Pete, like 2 years ago or more, they were asking him, well, why don't you still train? Because a lot of fighters train even when they're not going to box anymore. And he said, I don't want to let that animal out, because when I let that animal out, I can't stop him. And I think that's what's going to happen. He's going to step in the ring with this guy who's all roided up and who works hard. The kid really does put in the running here in Puerto Rico, Pete. He and his brother live, just a few miles from me. He's running with his crew. He's working out, doing sit-ups and hitting the heavy bag and everything else. He ain't Mike Tyson. He ain't Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, and Sugar Ray's great, but I'm saying, Mike Tyson's 50 pounds, 70 pounds bigger than Sugar Ray. You can't put a heavyweight champion in the ring with somebody who's not a heavyweight champion, or at least on his way to that. This guy's fought several, interesting matches, but he is not the guy that's going to punish Mike Tyson. It's the other way around. It'll be really fast, or it'll be really stupid if Tyson carries him. One or the other.
That's if they start dancing around embraced in the middle of the ring, then that's going to stink. You're right.
Yeah.
But if Iron Mike goes in there like we have always known him to be, and I'll tell you, watch any of those videos on whatever social media, whether it's Twitter, whatever it might be. I'll tell you what, the guy's taking it serious. Mike looks ready, man. He looks ready.
Scary.
And he's got the eye of the tiger still. He really does.
Ask Stallone about that. I'm sure Stallone would say the same thing, Pete.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be in the ring with this guy. He's bigger than Clubber Lang. Well, thanks for joining us, folks. As always, Pete and I do the Rebel's Edge 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We travel on Fridays. Let us know what you thought of that Monday wrap-up. If you like hearing that, or if you really would rather not, let us know, because we love input from you guys. We love when you retweet the program on Twitter and so forth. So we will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Bang.